Dr. Miller with the first of a video series on some of my favorite and emerging research articles in the field of exercise, sports science, nutrition science. I have a new microphone, by the way. So if you subscribe to my channel and go back and look at some of my old videos, you probably find that the sound quality isn't as good. So hopefully I'm sounding better. And I'm excited to be releasing more videos in the future. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell as well. I'm releasing 5 to 7 videos a week typically on a variety of topics. Depends on what I get on fire for that particular week and what I talk about. But certainly like this video after viewing it and comment below. Okay, so let's get into this first article. Again, one of my favorites. That's why it has to be the first one. And I'll explain why. It's called, you can see here, it's called Concurrent Endurance and Strength Training Not to Failure Optimizes Performance Games. It was published in 2010 in the journal, the Medicine and Science Sports Exercise, which is MSSE, which is the American College of Sports Medicine's official research journal. And so the author's first name, I'm going to butcher it, is Izquierdo-Gabarran, Mikel Izquierdo-Gabarran. And if you ever watch this, please forgive me for butchering your name, but your study that you led was fantastic. And so the reason it's fantastic, and it's not perfect, don't get me wrong, I'm not totally rose-colored glasses here, but what hit me about it was this is the kind of the beginning of the velocity-based training growth. It had already been around, but I had seen this in my own practice as a coach, is that the failure or close to failure type of approach just had such a high fatigue cost and so many, injuries being picked up. That's what I had been kind of from as an athlete myself, as a collegiate athlete. And this was the first study to show it was okay not to work harder. In fact, smarter was better. And when we looked at concurrent training, is what would be a good blend. So if you have an athlete that's doing a lot of endurance training and trying to get stronger or more powerful, what would be a good idea? How could that look? And how much volume is enough? So much nested. So let me explain this study quickly. So this is a study of trained rowers, which was also good. It wasn't untrained individuals per se, and they didn't go into great detail, but these are rowers that have been training for a while. Okay, for a while is very subjective, I realize, but it was 43 trained male rowers. Okay, with 12.1 years of regular training and competition experience. So at least there's some sort of training is what I'm getting at. Many studies are untrained individuals, and it's hard to infer those results. You can't generalize them to trained people. You just can't, right? Now you can look at some of the pieces and try to put them together with trained people, but it's hard to directly. So this is one of the few studies that I like it as well, as it has direct application, especially for trained people. So these were rowers for 8-week study. They were doing concurrent training, so they're doing endurance training. The groups I'm going to explain in a second were all doing endurance training. They all did the same amount of volume of endurance training. They use the bench pull. If you're not familiar in rowing, that's you lay in your belly and you pull the bar. Okay, so it's a rowing exercise, which makes sense if we're looking at upper body of rowers. This is sport specific. And the way the groups are broken down, and I'll explain the training, is they had a control group, a group that did 4 exercises in their training for 8 weeks. And these exercises were the bench pull, seated cable row, lat pull down, and the power clean. And then they had another group that did the exact same. Let me back up a second. This first group was configured such that they did these 4 exercises, but they did it to failure. It's a linear periodized program. Okay, and they have the program in here. It works from the 70s to the 90s, a typical linear program over the 8-week period. But these athletes had a prescribed load, and they were told to do the max that they could do. They were told to meet the reps essentially that were prescribed in this first group. The second group did half the repetitions as the group I just explained. Same exercises, half the repetitions though, same loading. Okay, so they're going not to failure. The next group they did half the exercises, so they didn't do the power clean or lat pull down, and they did half the volume. So now you're taking away 2 exercises, so you see a volume reduction. Okay, and then they had a control group. The outcome being tested, the outcome measure was the bench pull 1 RM and the bench pull across a spectrum, the power output watts across a spectrum of loads 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 85, and 100%. The only group that saw significant improvements in power and strength was the 4 exercise group not to failure. Okay, not fatigue. And so that was, from reading this, wow, this supported this idea of not having to go to failure. Because, athletes even struggle with that. When I coach athletes, you don't have to go to failure. What do I mean? I can't suffer. No, don't suffer. In fact, if you do, you'll see detriments. And the reason? Fatigue. Plain and simple. Fatigue. When you go to failure, you pick up fatigue. And at that point, fatigue starts to outstrip or outclimb the fitness that you're gaining. Okay. When these authors looked at where this difference across the spectrum of loads occurred, so they just looked at 1RM. We looked at watts in general across these groups, but where did the actual change occur? Where's the significance occurred? And so the failure group and the 2 exercise group, no significance. But in the group that was significant, the not to failure group, they saw the most improvement in 75 to 85% of their 1RM in terms of power. Okay. Also interesting, tracked in this study, was the authors did a 70% of 1RM power test each week. And if you look at this figure, if you ever get a chance to look at the study, I can't show it because of copyright, is the 2 not failure groups, so the ones that did less exercises. They saw improvements akin to that of the 4 exercise group up to about week 6. That's where they flatlined. Okay, where the fatigue group was just getting killed, right? If you look at their output, I mean, they saw a detriment in performance. They saw a little bit of a restoration of performance later on, but nothing significant. They barely hovering around. They were just hovering on baseline. So again, that speaks to the importance of training volume, right? So the 4 exercise group, not to failure, had the extra training volume to see continued gains beyond week 6 into week 8. Before they started, they had one. Looked like they plateaued from 7 to 8. We'll have to see what happened after that. Okay, maybe some fatigue was occurring there as well. So the take-home message of this study, and I consider it studies. There's so much information in this. So concurrent training, it can be done, right? You can see improvements in strength and power. Again, I know this is one variable, it's one study. I'm just giving you my impressions and then seeing this in practice as a coach, and then seeing this in the other research literature. And so you can see improvements by not going to failure in strength and power, which makes sense because of fatigue. You can do it while doing endurance training. You just have to be mindful of the volume, and there has to be enough volume to see change, even not to failure, over a linearized, periodized program. So you can't cut the volume out, is what I'm getting at. Is sometimes as we go up into a periodized program, we cut the volume too quickly, especially in our tapering periods. You need to do that, but we cut the volume too quickly, perhaps, when we go up to the later stages of a training program, when we start pulling exercises out. Now, sometimes that's by necessity. If an athlete, for instance, is starting to practice their sport, and we're overlapping the end of our training cycle with the actual starting of their sport. But for everybody else, make sure that you maintain the volume as much as possible until you're ready to taper, but just do it in a way that you don't go to failure. It's the failure part. So obviously there's a balance there. You might be taking some exercise away, but the study just really impressed on me a lot of important patterns that when you're setting up a program to consider. Volume, how to manage volume over time, not going to failure, especially if strength and power is your ultimate goal. And you can do concurrent training effectively and see improvements. So that's, especially even in trained people, that's possible if you manage the volume very, very carefully. So a lot of nested stuff in here. Now this is not a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, we all, that's pretty good. But this is a study that, again, that in trained people, that was very impactful on my philosophy of training, because it helped me to, be okay with what I was already seeing, that, going to failure so much was just killing people. Right? It was damaging them to the point where they couldn't recover. And then we wonder why after a training session, they were just completely destroyed and not seeing progress. And that, even supporting like athletes, we're not working hard enough. Well, as long as the intensity is coming up, and even if the volume is maintained, just general linear periodization, but we're not going to failure. And that's what you have to impress upon athletes in particular. Stay away from failure if strength and power are the goal. You can do it even while you're doing endurance training. It just has to be managed well. So I hope you found this video helpful. Again, I'll put more articles up, some of my favorites to start with, and then some of the new ones that are emerging. I think I just recently put up, I can't remember. I just put up a video in this idea of a research article that's put up talking about some of the hypertrophic responses. You can check that out. I did reference a journal, and I'm not calling it a journal club because it was more of something related to an idea of recompositioning, right, and hypertrophic responses and so on. So you can check that video out as well. But I will be putting up videos specifically looking at specific journal articles, research studies that have been published in the peer-reviewed literature. All right, I'll see you in the next video.